those that have been watching my blog, I'm speaking from Jersey, the Channel Islands. My name's Tony. I've always spoken about one case and one case only. The Jersey States of Jersey Police Force reference number to this case was M00037/2011. From the day this case started, I've always challenged it, as I knew the basic facts, and I will carry on telling you why. This was because my wife and I were attacked while in our home, an unprovoked attack at night by our cowardly, alcoholic, unstable neighbour. Now, before we get into this, you've seen how I've spoken about the case. This has nothing to do with the perpetrator, John Yates. This has nothing to do with him. He was the perpetrator, but we both feel sorry for him. He was left to look after himself. He's an unstable alcoholic, and nothing was done to help him. This is all about how this case became criminally corrupt. In part 6 of my blog, I think you'll see or hear that I tell you that this island now is getting run by the powerful, the rich and the silent. Well, let's go straight to the top. This case, at the time, the Attorney General was Tim Lecoq, and in the law office was Crown Advocate Conrad Yates. Now, Crown Advocate Conrad Yates was the perpetrator's nephew. So this is why I'm saying this now. This case, I feel, all the way through, and I'm pretty sure that I've got evidence going all the way along, that this case was controlled from high above, somebody very powerful. Now, whether it was because Tim Lecoq, the Attorney General, didn't want to have his friend, Crown Advocate Conrad Yates, involved in this, named to this case, because it was very serious. I mean, you're talking about 2 sophisticated petrol bombs with batteries. You're talking about being in public with a katana sword and 2 throwing knives. You're talking about a powerful catapult that John Yates used on my wife and I, smashing 2 of our double glazed units. Both panes were broken, large steel ball bearings, which I have one of, and also a still active World War II firearm, which was removed by the police from his home. So I can only take it that Tim Lecoq didn't want the law officers department involved in all of this, and he's done all this to protect. Being an old couple, he probably thought, oh, well, I'll give them a load of bullshit and they'll get fed up. I haven't got fed up. The more I've waited and challenged him, he can't answer any of my questions. I've got it on paper that he doesn't know Conrad Yates. And Conrad Yates has written to me saying he's not related to John Yates, which is a lie, both of them. They both lied there for a start. All this is on headed paper. Now, from there on, we can go back to the police. Now, the police have got a duty to send the report into the law office department. Let's start with day 1, the night. We had Police Officer Lee Scotland come to look at the case and see, but it was dark. Now, this man, he's a big man, a bit like a dinosaur, all body, no brain. He said, I'll keep you informed of what's going on, I'll give you an update. Well, he's a liar. All he did was give me bullshit and excuses all the way through. And my family, well, my wife and I, were left in a very dangerous situation, because all these items that I've told you, these very offensive items that the perpetrator John Yates had at his own, none of this was told to us. And this man was still drinking for 12 months after. Now, why would the police keep all this away from us? Why leave us in such danger? They ruined my family life, our family life. All my grandchildren used to come here at weekends and sleep. In the week, my grandchildren, we'd pick them up and they'd come here, we'd watch videos. Why would they hold all that away from us? I only found out at the end of the case just how serious this was. And now this is ruined. It ruined a family life. All because the top people didn't want to be known. They kept all these weapons out of it. Even though I've been to our daily paper and I've told them all about the case, they don't want to know. They don't want to write about it. Why? Because they're told from somebody higher up. That's why. Now this dinosaur Scotland of a policeman, he kept me excuse after excuse, and he couldn't do anything right. It was just crap. I told him, I said, the perpetrator had walked through town with a sword and 2 throwing knives. I said, a white van stopped to pick him up. And I said, I told you that. Have you chased it up? Have you investigated it? No. Right. I've told you that when he came out of the psychiatric assessment unit, that he was seen entering a weapons store. Did you chase that up? No. 2 things he didn't chase up. Why? Because he's helped covering this case up. That's why. And he just kept me hanging, and I was the one making, it was 40 phone calls I made in 10 months to try and get an update, because we had our windows closed and doors locked. The perpetrator was back home still drinking, and we didn't know what was going on. Now our grandchildren never came here. Now, in the 10th month, it's 10 months he kept me waiting and playing around. Police Scotland phoned me up and he said, Mr. Shurno, he said, I've been told this case might not go to court. I said, pardon? He said, this case might not go to court. I said, you've got to be joking. I said, who told you to say that? He said, well, I'm not at liberty to say. I said, right, fine. I said, well, put it in a letter. I said, and give me the reasons why it won't go to court. I never had a reply. So, the beginning of November, this is 11 months now, I wrote out an official complaint against 5 police officers. All this because they were covering this case up. Within 4 days of sending my official complaint off, I had one of the police inspector, Mary Lahagara, came to my door, wanted to chat to us, spoke with us for an hour and a half. She brought no paperwork and she took no notes, and she said she knew nothing about the case, even though she was Police Officer Lee Scotland's charge hand or shift lead or whatever you want to call it. Now you're telling me in a serious case like this she knew nothing about it. What a load of crap. Sly sods. She sat down with us. We spoke about the firearm he had next door, and I showed her that it wasn't possible to fire from the catapult from his bedroom window like he claimed on impulse, because there's no bedroom windows on the north side of the house. I showed her the tree and the burn marks around the tree and the rope still hanging there where he fired from and where the ball bearings landed. But all this lady was interested in was retracting my official complaint against 5 people. That's all it was. That's all she ever wanted. Excuses were that, well, it might be a long process. I said, well, that's fine. I said, I'm in no rush. And here I am, years later, still arguing about it. But now I've got all the evidence. Not one person, from one police chief, Mike Browan, I wasn't allowed to speak to him at all, to the next chief officer, Robin Smith. I've been up to the police station, the headquarters. I've asked could I speak to him? No. I've asked to speak to Mark Hafey. No, I can't speak to him. I've asked to speak to Luke Freeman. No, I can't speak to anybody up there. I've written, but they blanked me off. And I'll tell you why. Because when the professionals, this is where they all work together. The police, the professional standards, the Jersey Police Complaints Authority and the Minister for Home Affairs all worked hand in hand. This I can prove. I've got documents, data access, which tells me everything. The police complaints go into the Jersey Professional Standards Department. They sort out whether it's serious enough to carry on with. Well, they thought my first ones were serious enough. They weren't vexatious or frivolous because they carried on with them. Now, they sat at the police station, my official complaints, for over 2 months, and I never had a letter from them. So what I did was I took a copy of all my complaints down to the Jersey Police Complaints Authority and handed them in and spoke to the person there. I said, have you had any news? He said, no. I said, right, well, there's my complaint. I said, I haven't had any news from the police, so it's in your hands now. Now, I was told by the new person that took over, Advocate Prosser, Debbie Prosser, that no, there's going to be an investigation. A policeman will be appointed and he will investigate the complaints. Every month I would write to her and say, how's it getting on? How's it getting on? Oh, it's fine, yes, it's fine, it's fine. Nothing was going on. The 9th month I said, well, it's been 9 months now. I said, how much longer is this investigation going to take? She wrote back saying, we should know next month. That's 10 months. So I wrote back and said, well, that's good, because when I see the report, I said, I'll be able to pick every little lie up. I said, any lies, I said, I shall tell you about it. Well, the next letter I had back, Mr. Journo, there hasn't been a policeman investigating your complaints. We've decided now there's going to be no report from us. What we're going to do is we're going to hand it to the Police Service of Northern Ireland. What a load of crap. This was because we're 2 old people. That's why. And I'd been to my solicitor, my advocate, 35 years good service, Mike Backhurst, and I told him after the case what was going on, and he said, no, he said, you've got something serious case here. He said, some questions have to be answered. I said, yeah, that's what I've said. I said, but nobody has given to me. So he said, give me a week, he said, and I'll come back to you. I said, okay, fine. Went back a week later. My God, didn't things change? I said, how'd you get on, Mike? He said, well, he said, all I can tell you is drop the case. I said, what do you mean? I said, you've changed. I said, who do you speak to at the police station? He said, Police Inspector Mary Lehegerer. I said, well, she's one of the police members I've made an official complaint against. So I said, you know the truth of the case? I said, and what's being covered up? He said, Tony, just drop it. So, here we go. I couldn't get any advocate over here now to fight for me because I'd never win it anyway. But I keep going and going. I keep challenging this Tim McCobb. He was Attorney General. Why? why would this man approve the weapon that was being used in the cowardly, unstable alcoholics attack, the powerful catapult and the large steel ball bearings? Why would he dismiss that? That was evidence, that was something that was used. Why did he dismiss the 2 petrol bombs with batteries? Why dismiss the sword? The 2 throwing knives? He was in public with them. Oh, and that charge, being in public, that got dropped, even though there was a witness that saw him out there with them. And when he walked into police headquarters, they arrested him because he'd been in public. So why was that charge dropped? From that day on, I've always challenged Tim Lecoq in his decision, but this big-headed little sly sod, oh, horrible little man, he put it in our daily paper, our Evening Post, that he doesn't have to tell the people, the victims, why he's made decisions. But I'm sorry, I said, your decision, I said, to drop all these weapons, I said, it stands out. I said, the only reason why it's not a scandal, I said, is because the public don't know about it. I said, there'd be a big outcry otherwise. He said, I don't have to tell you. I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, I've challenged you, and you do. I said, you can't just drop weapons that have been used in the attack. And I said, another thing is, I said, this case right from the start, why did you allow and participate in letting it go to the magistrate's court? I said, this case should have gone straight to the Royal Court, no questions asked. He wouldn't answer. I said, and then another thing, I said, the magistrate, Bridget Shaw, as soon as she saw petrol bombs and swords and throwing knives and the attack on 2 old people, she should have refused listening to that in her court. So I said, why did she carry on with this case? I said, I went there, I said, on the first day of the trial. I said, that was